With the rollout of patch 0.15, one of the new mechanics that was added into the game was marathon mode, an interesting way to play Tarkov with the ability to travel to locations without going back to the stash is the main reason to give it a shot. We don't know how popular the mode was or how many players interacted with it, but the first few times that I messed around with it personally, I found marathon mode to be an incredibly more interesting and immersive experience over the traditional Tarkov formula. It was a great shakeup to what we know. You had to think about so much more. Did you bring enough ammo to supply yourself for multiple maps? Do you have food and water in case you don't find any? Is your armor going to be able to withstand potentially multiple encounters with AI and other players? If you went into marathon mode, sure, you could back out at any time and take a normal extract out, but many wanted to challenge themselves by either extracting from each map without dying, or starting with nothing and seeing how far you could take it. Overall, I would say the reception to the mode was fairly positive, and the community generally welcomed the additional mode of play. What they've done recently in a smaller update is remove marathon mode, but inject it directly into the normal mode of Tarkov play. Now, anyone, at any time, can use the new transit points to get from one map to another, and there's more of them, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. They've made map-to-map travel actually possible in normal Tarkov, and I'm very excited to start using it going forward. The biggest complaint I had with marathon mode personally was the fact that if you wanted to play in that style, you had to start at ground zero every single time, which really sucked. That map is quite a struggle to get off of because if you're over level 20, you're also in a lobby with people that are that level or higher. And considering it only had one point of transit to take you onto streets, it made starting a proper marathon mode attempt very challenging. But luckily, BSG was either paying attention to feedback or this is just how they wanted it to be now, because every map has at least one point to move to another map. And to add to this newfound sauce, each transit point only takes 1 minute to open up instead of the 7 minutes it took before, which, to be fair, was only really a problem again on ground zero. That map just sucks to play. Love the design and how much attention to detail they added for beginner players with all the signs and context clues scattered around the map, but playing it in practice, it's really rough. What was really quite a nice surprise with Marathon becoming a part of normal Tarkov is that it's not even just available to only PMCs. Even player scavs can use them to get from one map to another if they can't find any desirable loot, which is something I actually never thought was going to happen. It's almost cooler than being able to use them on your PMC, but we'll get to why that's the case in a moment. But with that level of freedom being open up to all players, including player scavs, it really does allow people to craft narratives and stories regardless of how they enjoy the game. What this also gets me thinking about is how BSG might one day remove the ability to choose what map you scav on. We've talked about those implications in a previous video, and while initially that seems like a really bad idea, if you can just transit from one map you don't want to be on to where you actually wanted to go, that gives you more incentive to use the mechanics altogether. It also might allow scav cooldowns to be reduced by a significant amount. If you want to go to customs but you spawn on streets, you'll need to work your way there. This, well, does two things. It keeps you in the game for longer. You'll spend less time in loading screens if you try to maximize whatever map the game decided to put you on before going to another one. Even if you make just a beeline to the customs transit point, it means that player scavs will need to put in some level of work to get to their desired map, instead of always just going to streets or whatever map they prefer to play on. This addition has some large implications that we might be feeling in the future, and I'm excited to see if they evolve or iterate on this mechanic even further. The biggest challenge that Marathon mode had to overcome was the reason to engage with it in the first place. There wasn't a real, tangible incentive to play Marathon other than the uniqueness of it for some kind of challenge playthrough. Sure, there was a bunch of new quests that were introduced alongside the new mode with some better than average rewards for completion, but even something as simple as an XP boost would have given players a real reason to play more than once or twice. Luckily, that has since been changed. Now, depending on how many times you transit to other maps, you will get a modifier at the end when you do finally extract. As far as I know, this multiplier stacks up to I think exactly 17 raids in a row without dying. Why this number? I have no idea, but there is plenty of wiggle room now to try and squeeze another raid in before leaving, just to get a little bit more experience out of the whole ordeal. But again, this is what Marathon Moded was lacking, a clear, understandable, and enticing reason to play the mode, or in this case, use the transit points. What this also allows for is an even more efficient stacking of quests on top of each other. In the background footage, I completed Lost Contact for Therapist, Energy Crisis for Mechanic, used the transit point to head over to Woods, and then completed Lenley's Part 1 for Skier, all without having to go back to my stash. It's actually amazing. And this was just one use case. I can only imagine the creativity of routing people will be able to figure out later on the more they play and use the transit points. Imagine being able to complete a quest or two on 3 or even 4 maps in a row without having to go to your stash in between all of them. It sounds like such a minor thing, but there is this level of immersion and satisfaction when not having to pause in between all these quests from different vendors. What would truly make this the best feature in the game would be if we had the ability to complete a quest, go to a transit point, turn that quest in, and then accept a new one that was on the same map. Imagine how much more efficiently you could get through most of Peacekeeper's quests on Shoreline. He has a string of quests that boil down to get the thing and get out. How awesome would it be to grab a quest item, turn it in at a transit point, accept the next one, but still be in the raid without having to sit through multiple loading screens? That is such a tall order and a big ask. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but the thought of being able to stay in one raid and complete tons of quests for that specific map makes me really excited, even if we might not ever truly see that come into the game. The direct injection of the Marathon mode into normal Tarkov was a genuinely fantastic idea. The transit points are there, you don't have to engage with them if you don't want to, they only take a minute to activate, and because there are usually more than one, there is little fear about being killed while waiting for that timer to hit 0. It just adds another dynamic layer to the game, and it kind of desperately needed it. This will make the late game for Tarkov feel much more interesting because people might be more willing to run multiple raids in a row without ever returning to the stash. But having the option to leave as a last resort is always nice to have. I'm going to be trying to take advantage of this mechanic now, and especially when we do reset again at the end of the year, I imagine. And I would encourage everyone to try and map out a route that you can take and give Marathon a whirl in the normal Tarkov game. You might find your second wind to keep playing the game if you're one of those who tends to stop playing after the first month or two. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you've used any of the transit locations since they've made this change to go to another map, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about the new features in Tarkov that have tons of potential but might not actually get ever flushed out. I hope to see you in future ones.